So now we're going to go back to problem solving before we go into our action plan. Now, remember yesterday, we talked about problem solving. What's the first thing we want to do when we're solving a problem? We want to define the problem. We want to define the problem, and then we want to take what we call ownership, right? Those are the two steps. Why do I keep coming back to this? Because this is part of your action plan. If you don't define your problem well, your action plan is not going to be good. Okay, so the problem we're looking at is the elderly people are complaining that the teenagers at the library are making too much noise. They are finding it hard to read their newspapers in that noisy environment. So what's the problem?
Making
The teenagers. Teenagers is one problem. It could be one of the problems. Okay, noisy teenagers. What else could be the problem? The what older?
Noisy environment.
A nice noisy environment. What else? I heard somebody say older people. Okay, the elderly people. What else could be the problem? A quiet place. A quiet place and a noisy place, right? You said complaining? They're people are complaining. Yeah, that's kind of a problem. Other ideas for what this problem is?
Reading place.
What is?
Reading place.
A reading place. That's a pretty good list, right? Depending on which of these you pick, you're going to solve this problem differently, right? Let's say you decide it's the noisy teenagers. Then you're going to go tell the noisy teenagers to be quiet. If you decide it's a noisy environment, then you might decide you have to do something about the environment. If it's the elderly people, you may tell them, well, quit complaining, right? This is the kind of things that happen. At a quiet place, you might think about, again, your environment. People are complaining. Yeah, that's a problem, but is it really the problem? And reading place, right? So there's, depending on how you define this particular problem, you're going to approach it in a different way. What could be this problem is that you've got two user groups with two different needs in the same space. That could be the problem, right? Or that is the problem. So what do you do then? If that's it, two user groups and different needs. If you define the problem as this, what would be the ownership of this problem? How would you take responsibility for this problem? If you were in this library, what would you do? If you say, I think the problem is that we have two different user groups with different needs, and therefore we should, or I should, what are you going to do?
We create a place.
We create a space that fits the needs of the user groups, okay? So you're taking responsibility for looking at, this is a problem with the teenagers, this is a problem with the elderly people, how do we create a quiet space, and how do we create a noisy space, right? A lot of libraries, when this happens, this is where they focus. It's the teenagers, you go tell the teenagers to be quiet, and then what do the teenagers do? They're told to be quiet in the library. They leave the library. They don't come. They don't come, right? So one of the things when you're starting to think about problems is, okay, we've made this list, so it's really good to sit in a group and get everybody's idea about what this problem can be, so that you're seeing it from different perspectives. And then you usually can end up coming to an agreement that this may be the problem. Now you may end up, you could have said, you know, we have these complaints from these elderly people, and somebody will have said, how many elderly people complain? And somebody says, 1. Too bad, you know, that's too bad, right? But if it was like 15, that's a bigger problem, right? Or how many teenagers are being noisy? If it's 1, that's 1. So again, you probably want more information before you arrive at this place. But if you arrive at this place, and because you've kind of done your analysis of this, you can see. So when we solve problems, we tend to make snap decisions. Okay, the problem is I gotta go take care of those teenagers. The problem is I gotta go take care of those elderly people, without really thinking about what could we do that would meet the needs of both groups. Yeah? Okay, so let's say that you've decided that you need a quiet space and you need a noisy space. And so then what are you going to do? How are you going to do that in your library?
Whether we have to think whether we have resources,
We have the resources, you have
space,
right? The people to do these things, you're gonna have to do all these things. It's time for an action plan, right? So you can see how the problem has gotten you down to where you now need to do an action plan. Does that make sense? Yeah, so that's why you have an action plan, because you've already done all this work, which yesterday you did. Remember, you defined a problem in your library, you just came up with a solution for your problem. So you can see now we're ready for this action plan now.